There is a version of the past that we think we know. The ancient Romans, the togas, the marble columns, the empire. And then there is the version that stays buried. The one that only comes out when someone decides to dig deep enough, and in the right place, at the right time. The version that forces you to reconsider everything you thought separated them from us. In April 2024, archaeologists working in Pompeii opened a door that had been sealed under volcanic ash since the year 79 AD. What they found inside was not a ruin. It was a room so well preserved, so specific, so deliberate, so calculated, that it raised a question nobody was expecting. Not, how did this survive? But why did someone build this in the first place? This is the Black Room. Archaeologists working at the ancient Roman city of Pompeii have revealed beautifully preserved frescoes in the Black Room, a banqueting hall in a newly excavated part of the site. The walls are black, not dark, not faded. Black. The works of art line the high walls of what was once a large banquet hall. The walls themselves were painted mostly black, and the figures on the frescoes appear to emerge from the shadows. The floor is white, entirely white. The well-preserved mosaic floor was comprised of more than 1 million white tiles. 1 million white tiles, under walls of absolute black. And on those black walls, 2 frescoes, 2 scenes, both from the same ancient story. The 2 frescoes show scenes from Greek mythology and literature. One presents Paris, the Prince of Troy, meeting the beautiful Spartan princess Helen. His subsequent kidnapping of her triggered the Trojan War, as described in Homer's Iliad. In another, the god Apollo stands with a lyre in an attempt to seduce the Trojan priestess Cassandra, who ultimately rejects his offer and is doomed to proclaim prophecies that go unbelieved. 2 stories about desire, 2 stories about catastrophe, painted on black walls, in a room nobody was supposed to see in daylight. This was not a gallery. This was not a temple. This was a dining room. Here is the detail that changes everything. The walls were painted black to prevent the smoke from the oil lamps being seen on the walls. People would meet to dine after sunset. The flickering light of the lamps had the effect of making the images appear to move. Let that settle. The black was not aesthetic. It was engineering. The room was designed to be experienced exclusively at night, lit only by fire, where the painted figures on the walls would tremble with each flicker of the flame. Helen and Paris, Apollo and Cassandra. Not static images, moving ones. Your brain, sitting in that room in the year 79 AD, would not have registered paint. It would have registered presence, bodies in motion, scenes unfolding in real time. The artist who painted this room was not decorating a space. They were building a machine. A machine designed to make ancient myths feel like they were happening right now, in this room, at this table, while you ate. The question is, why these myths? Why these specific stories? That answer requires knowing who built this room, and that man is considerably more interesting and more disturbing than the frescoes themselves. On walls and millstones, experts found the initials ARV, short for Aulus Rustius Verus, who was a wealthy politician in Pompeii. We know who ARV is. He's Aulus Rustius Verus. Archaeologist Sophie Hay told the BBC. We know him from other political propaganda in Pompeii. He's a politician. He's super rich. We think he may be the one who owns the posh house behind the bakery and the laundry. Sophie Hay project archaeologist at Pompeii's Regio 9 excavation, confirmed the attribution in 2024 after cross-referencing the initials with electoral inscriptions found throughout the same city block. In 77 AD, 2 years before the Vesuvian eruption, this man was Duumvir, the highest office in the city council, the highest elected office, in one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. And he chose, with all that power and wealth, to build a room with black walls, designed to be entered only after dark. That is not interior design. That is a statement. Aulus Rustius Verus was not an artist. He was a politician. And in Pompeii in the 1st century AD, those two things were not as different as you might think. Archaeologists believe the spectacular home belonged to prominent local politician Aulus Rustius Verus, who would have had a long list of visitors who came to his house to transact public and private business. Clients, business associates, voters, fellow magistrates. Hosting them for a meal in his gigantic dining room lubricated the gears of the Roman system of favors and support. Every person who walked into that black room was being worked. But here is where it becomes contradictory. Archaeologists found Verus's initials on a millstone leaning against the house, suggesting he may have been providing the bakery with financial support. Vote buying was common practice in Pompeii. The candidate and the baker likely collaborated in a way that verged on being illegal. Verus may well have realized that voters, above all else, live on bread, said Maria Chiara Scapaticcio, a philologist at Federico II University. So here is what we know about this man. He held the highest political office in the city. He may have secretly funded a bakery to buy votes. He built a private bathing complex so large that Dr. Zuchtriegel confirmed. There are just a few houses that have a private bath complex. So it was something really for the wealthiest of the wealthy. And this is probably the biggest bath complex in a Pompeian private home. And he built this room. This black room. With these specific myths on the walls. Helen and Paris. The couple whose desire started the most catastrophic war in ancient history. Cassandra. The woman who knew the truth and was cursed so that no one would ever believe her. Why those two stories? Why, out of every myth in the ancient world, did the most powerful man in Pompeii choose those two to look at while he ate? Nobody knows. And that is the detail that no archaeologist has been able to answer. Now look at what else they found in that same block. The latest digs unearthed 2 skeletons in the house. A woman aged between 35 and 50, holding onto jewelry and coins, and a young man in his late teens or early 20s. They had locked themselves inside a small room and were soon buried alive by the dense rivers of pyroclastic flow that Mount Vesuvius produced on the 24th of August in 79 AD. Around her body were gold and silver coins, and a pair of gold and pearl earrings. Could she have been Aulus's wife? Nobody knows that either. And in the bakery next door, the one where Verus may have been buying votes with free bread, skeletons belonging to a child and 2 adults from the 79 CE eruption. They may have been slaves crushed by falling stones during the eruption. 3 of them in the bakery, while renovation was still underway. The presence of roof tiles, pots of lime mortar and trowels suggests these areas were being renovated together during Pompeii's final days. The most powerful man in the city was rebuilding his empire on the day Vesuvius erupted. His walls were mid-renovation. His bread was still being baked. His black dining room was waiting for the next banquet. And then, nothing. Everything stopped in the same hour and stayed exactly that way for 1,945 years. Here is where this room divides people. One reading is this: Aulus Rustius Verus was a man of extraordinary sophistication. He chose the myths of Helen, Paris, and Cassandra because they were the most complex moral questions the ancient world had produced. In his black room, surrounded by guests he needed to impress and control, he wanted conversations about fate, desire, and the limits of power. The room was a philosophical salon disguised as a dinner party. As Gabriel Zuchtriegel, the director of the Archaeological Park of Pompeii, said, the mythological couples provided ideas for conversations about the past and life. In reality, they refer to the relationship between the individual and fate. Cassandra, who can see the future but no one believes her. Apollo, who sides with the Trojans against the Greek invaders, but being a god, cannot even ensure victory. Helen and Paris, who, despite their politically incorrect love affair, are the cause of the war, or perhaps merely a pretext. That is one reading. The other is darker. A politician who may have bought votes with bread, who built a room that only functioned in the dark, who put on his walls the story of a man whose desire destroyed a civilization, and the story of a woman who told the truth and was punished for it. If you believe the first version, this is a room built by a man who thought deeply about power and its costs. If you believe the second version, this is a room built by a man who already knew he was doing something that could not survive the light. Both readings use the same facts. Both readings lead to completely different men. The black room is still there, in Pompeii, under temporary roofing, with plaster glue injected into the walls to keep it from collapsing. The frescoes are fragile now. They survived 2,000 years of ash and darkness, and they may not survive open air. Cassandra is still on that wall, still seated, still rejected, still knowing what comes next, and unable to make anyone believe her. The Trojans didn't listen to her either, and we know how that story ended. Whether Aulus Rustius Verus built this room as an act of intellectual honesty or as an act of very careful concealment is something the ash did not preserve. Only the paintings survived. And paintings, unlike politicians, do not explain themselves.